Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So, really quick, when you have a chance, make sure you check out my episode on Draft Nuff, founder of Latin Name, where I talk about a fantastic turn 1 win. Yeah, this commander has a lot of potential, and not just for combos, but don't go check out that episode just yet, because you've got to stay tuned for this exciting new card that had me saying, whoa. Well, yeah, just then, obviously, and then when I saw the card is more so what I mean. But yeah, blame Eddie for everything that I say wrong in this episode and any other episode. And with all that said, let's jump into it. So, first up, a big thank you to MTG.design for existing because, well, the image for this card is extremely grainy. We can see the words and everything like that. But yeah, so I basically, made a custom version of it and still utilized the, art of it. So yeah, as you can see, that's a little grainy. Regardless, now I'm blabbing on again. Goodness gracious. 4/3 Phyrexian Warlock, costing 3 and a black. Let's talk about Gixian Puppeteer. It has, whenever you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So first up, that can be a lot of drain throughout the game. I mean, again, this does not limit it to just your turn. This can apply to any player's turn. So if you are drawing multiple cards in any turn, you're going to be draining your opponents. Obviously, on your turn, it's going to be quite a bit easier to meet that requirement because, yeah, I mean, you get your draw step draw, and then, you just need to draw one more card, and you meet that, and you drain each of your opponents. On your opponent's turns, though, of course, there are plenty of ways to instant speed draw 2 cards, or, 1 card at a time. And we'll talk about some commanders that really might want to consider this one. But yeah, when you are doing so, you're going to be padding your life total quite a bit while also taking your opponents down. But now let's read the rest of the card, and this is where the real spice is. When Gixian Puppeteer dies, return another target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is a 4-mana creature that essentially, does a lot of work for you in draining your opponents, but also can just basically replace itself with a slightly lesser costed creature. So yeah, I mean, that can just be a lot of value inherently right there. I mean, this is just a value bundle kind of altogether. But of course, this amount of value can be, well, let's just say an infinite amount of value because, yeah, this card is very reminiscent of another card that has quite a few combos. And yeah, this one, I think actually is going to be able to slot into more decks for a couple of reasons. We'll talk about why. And actually, I guess one of those reasons is pretty obvious when you do see the card. And now I'm just blabbing on again for like the 3rd time this episode. I'm so sorry. Clearly I need more coffee. Let's jump into what makes this card special, and let's jump into the comparable card to this one. And that card would be the fantastic combo piece with Crypt Champion, which is a 2/2 zombie with double strike that costs 3 and a black, and it has, when it enters the battlefield, each player puts a creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from their graveyard into play. And when Crypt Champion comes into play, sacrifice it unless red was spent to cast it. Now, this card is somewhat similar, again, to our brand new Gixian Puppeteer, but obviously there are some differences. This one does not give us any just inherent value when it is in play. Sure, it's a 2/2 a double strike, but, our new card is a 4/3, and also, again, drains our opponents throughout the game just by drawing multiple cards in a single turn. Now, obviously, where the similarity to this one is both of these are 4-mana cards. Again, have the exact same mana cost, essentially. And then they also are going to be bringing back a creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Though, of course, they go about it in a different way. Crypt Champion is on an ETB. When this one comes into play, that's when you get that reanimation. Versus Gixian Puppeteer, you are getting that trigger when the Puppeteer itself dies. And another difference, of course, is that Crypt Champion does not target that creature because, well, it is allowing every single player to put a creature card with converted mana cost 3 less from their graveyard into play. So this also benefits your opponents too. Whereas Gixian Puppeteer is only going to be benefiting you. Only you actually get a creature back. Another difference is, of course, that, well, Crypt Champion, its color identity is going to be in Rakdos because it does have that red in that last part again. When it comes into play, sacrifice unless red was spent to play it. So, yeah, there is that requirement as well, essentially, that, you know, this is going to be fitting in less decks, obviously, because, well, Gixian Puppeteer only has black in its color identity, so it can fit in a lot more decks out there. Now, whereas that part might seem like a downside too, where you have to actually sacrifice unless you spend red to cast it, there are certain circumstances, we'll talk about that here in a bit, that's actually an upside, but in most circumstances, I would say Gixian Puppeteer is going to be superior in multiple ways. But now that we've talked about, you know, probably some of the inspiration for this brand new card, you know, in a comparable card with this one, let's talk about the combo potential of our brand new Gixian Puppeteer. First up, let's talk about Sophies Daughter, a 2/2 human scout that costs green-white and has sacrifice Sophies Daughter. When target creatures put in your graveyard this turn, return that card to the battlefield. Essentially, Sophie can sacrifice itself to ensure that another one of your creatures is going to be coming back. And of course, in this case, it's going to be Gixian Puppeteer. Now, this combo works a bit differently than with Crypt Champion, and actually Crypt Champion, let's just go over this one first, can just go infinite kind of inherently with Sophies Daughter, though you do need some kind of a benefit from it. Because essentially, yeah, you could just play your Crypt Champion without, you know, paying that red, so you have to sacrifice it. You could sacrifice Sophie to target your Crypt Champion and ensure that it's going to be coming back. Your Crypt Champion will come into play and be sacrificed, and you're also going to get that trigger to get a creature back into play with mana cost 3 or less, which of course is Sophie. So you can just do that loop again and again and again and again, basically an infinite number of times. Now, inherently that does nothing, but it's, you know, if you've got like, you know, an Impact Tremors in play, yeah, you can ping all your opponents down with that, or any other kind of, you know, ETB trigger or LTB trigger. A Blood Artist would also do the work too. Now, Gixian Puppeteer works in a different way because, again, Gixian Puppeteer just can't, you know, inherently be sacrificed itself. We do need an outlet for that, and of course, we'll talk about plenty of fantastic free sacrifice outlets to utilize in combos like this here in a bit, but yeah, the combo is quite simple. Have both Gixian Puppeteer and Sophie in play, sacrifice Sophie, target your Gixian Puppeteer, when your, you know, Gixian Puppeteer is going to, you know, put in your graveyard, it's going to come right back to the battlefield. Then sacrifice your Gixian Puppeteer, you get that trigger to return another target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. You're going to target, obviously, Sophie, bring Sophie back, and yeah, your Gixian Puppeteer will be coming back as well, thanks to Sophie's ability. Again, as I mentioned, yes, you do need a free sacrifice outlet, and we'll talk about some here in a bit to make this work. But yeah, there's a lot of fantastic ways you can combo with that. Another way to combo that just, again, kind of in a weird way, inherently combos with Crypt Champion would be some clone cards that have a mana value of 3 or less, like Mirror Image, Glasspool Mimic, and Phantasmal Image. Now, Mirror Image, for example, says you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature you control. So this could just inherently go infinite with, you know, Crypt Champion, kind of in a similar way to Sophie, though again, it really doesn't, you know, benefit you to do so unless you've got a benefit, you know, from actually having creature sacrificed or coming back. Regardless, that combo works like this. Mirror Image is in your hand, Crypt Champion is in play, you play your Mirror Image, cool, comes into play. But wait, let's say you didn't spend a red to actually cast it, so you have to sacrifice it. Well, the trigger is still going onto the stack to allow you to bring a creature back from the graveyard with mana value 3 or less. So your Mirror Image is going to be sacrificed, and you can also use its own trigger as a copy of Crypt Champion to bring itself back. Because, of course, Mirror Image, while in your graveyard, has a mana value of 3, so yes, you can bring it back with its own trigger. Again and again and again, an infinite number of times, and again, if you've got Impact Tremors or whatnot or Blood Artist, cool, you win. Now, the combo with Gixian Puppeteer works in a different way, but is somewhat similar, though we do need 2 of these clones to actually pull it off. So let's say we also had Glasspool Mimic, which says when enters the battlefield, enters a copy of a creature you control, except it's a shapeshifter rogue and it shoots other types. So very similar to Mirror Image. Regardless, yeah, let's just say we've got one of these in our graveyard and one in our hand. And of course, again, a free sacrifice outlet of some sort that we'll talk about here in a bit. But yeah, let's say we play our Mirror Image, making it a copy of Gixian Puppeteer. Cool. Now we use our sacrifice outlet to sacrifice that Mirror Image copy, and then we get that trigger to return another target creature card with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield, and that will be, again, Glasspool Mimic, which we're going to have come into play as a copy of, you guessed it, Gixian Puppeteer. Then we use our free sacrifice outlet to sacrifice that one to get back our Mirror Image, to get another copy, and you see where this is going. So yeah, Phantasmal Image is another clone that could work with it, Protean Raider, etc, etc, etc. And like I mentioned, yeah, you do need a free sacrifice outlet to actually pull off combos with this Gixian Puppeteer, but yeah, I mean, there are fantastic ones out there that can really help you out, like Goblin Bombardment. Sacrifice a creature, it's going to deal 1 damage to any target. So as long as you can, sacrifice creatures infinitely, which of course you can do and will be doing with combos like this, yeah, you can ping down anything. You can ping down all of, the creatures that you don't like, you can ping down Planeswalkers, or yeah, just most likely you're just going to ping down your opponent's faces. Speaking of taking out players, yeah, Altar of Dementia is another free sacrifice out that is fantastic, and it can do just that. Sacrifice a creature, target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power from the top of their library to their graveyard. Basically, mill a player equal to a creature's power that you were sacrificing. So of course, you can mill out all of your opponents when you're going infinite with this. Speaking of going infinite, yeah, of course, there are free sacrifice outlets like, Phyrexian Altar, Ashnod's Altar that just sacrifice creatures for mana. Cool. Get infinite mana of any one color, it's Phyrexian Altar. I mean, it's any colors, essentially. When you're doing this infinite number of times, you have infinite mana of all colors. Or Ashnod's Altar, infinite mana that is colorless. Yeah, I mean, either of these is going to help you win the game, essentially, in a wide variety of ways. And I can't believe I forgot to put Thermopod in here. Thermopod is fantastic. Basically, it's a slug that can sacrifice for a red mana. So keep that one in mind, too. Also keep in mind some commanders that really might want to consider this card. And yeah, I mean, of course, if you are building around, combos like the ones I mentioned, yeah, that's going to be a little different than the commanders that I mentioned that are going to really work with, that value proposition. The ability to say, hey, all right, I'm going to be drawing some cards, draining my opponents, also just getting additional value when this dies and getting something back. Like I mentioned, yeah, you don't have to go infinite for this card to be good. It's just a good value card. Quasar, Augur of Agonies, can be a great commander for this new card. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. You are heavily incentivized to draw a lot of cards throughout the game with this commander, and yeah, many of those cards drawn are probably going to be on your opponent's turns as well. So, draw a lot of cards throughout the game, drain your opponents, drain them even further with this new card, and when your opponents actually, deal with Gixian Puppeteer, get something else back of value. And speaking of draining, next up, how about a Yara, First of Locthwain, a 2/3 elf noble that says, whenever it or another black creature is battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. On top of that, tap, sacrifice another black creature, draw a card. So of course, this new card can help out in a lot of ways. Again, this commander loves draining your opponents, so yeah, I mean, drain them even further with that second card drawn. And yeah, this commander also can help you draw more cards in a single turn. So draw some more cards, drain your opponents, and you can actually even, yes, just utilize the Gixian Puppeteer as, just a sacrifice to actually get something else back, essentially, when you need it, exactly when you need it with this commander, by tapping and sacrificing that to get something back and to draw a card on top of it. And yeah, actually, another thing to keep in mind is that your commander, of course, does have a mana value of 3 or less, so yeah, your commander might be something that you can actually get back with that Puppeteer as well. Next up, though, how about Villas, Broker of Blood, an 8/8 flyer, ouch, that has pay a black, pay 2 life, target creature gets -1/-1 till end of turn, and whenever you lose life, draw that many cards. So Villas has a ton of upside for losing life. You draw a lot of cards with this. Now, of course, I mean, eventually that life loss might catch up to you, but not really if you've got the Gixian Puppeteer, because again, whenever you're drawing your second card in a turn, you are draining each of your opponents and you are gaining 2 life. So even just with its own ability, again, pay a black, pay 2 life, you're going to be, taking out a creature, potentially, or just making one smaller. You're going to be losing 2 life, drawing 2 cards. So just for a black mana again and 2 life. Cool. We drew 2 cards. We drain all our opponents for 2, thanks to our new card, and we also gain 2 life, so we gain that life back. So essentially, in combination, this is just pay a black, draw 2 cards, no downside, and also a downside for your opponents to lose life. And of course, with this commander, there's also plenty of ways to just lose life kind of, however you want to, whenever you want to, just pay 1 life here and there and everywhere, essentially. So yeah, you can even just draw cards for free, again, with no downside to you in combination with this new card, but a major downside to your opponents. Speaking of a downside, well, for your opponents, Yawgmoth, Rand Physician, the Doctor is in, pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature, put a -1/-1 counter up to 1 target creature, and draw a card. So yeah, you're going to have plenty of creature fodder for a commander like this. You can easily sacrifice multiple creatures in a turn to draw some cards. So again, drain your opponents, negate that life loss essentially. Again, if you sacrifice 2 creatures in a turn and you draw 2 cards and you paid 2 life to do so, well, you're going to be draining your opponents, you're going to be gaining that life back. And yeah, I mean, Yawgmoth doesn't really need another reason to want to sacrifice a creature, but sure, if you want to get a different creature back out of your graveyard, utilize it, sacrifice your Puppeteer, get that back. One final commander that I will bring up, though, that really might want to utilize this card is Taste of Karlov. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers initial time. And on top of that, for whatever reason, creature tokens you control Vigilance and Lifelink. Yeah, that's not really needed for this commander to be incredibly powerful, but it is. Yeah, basically the Death Harmonicon commander. So, sure, I mean, there are plenty of ways, of course, to draw a good amount of cards when you're sacrificing creatures with a Teysa deck, so you can very easily drain your opponents quite quickly as well. Again, thanks to that Gixian Puppeteer, in combination, of course, with, Blood Artist effects as well. But on top of that, yeah, you can double up that death trigger from Gixian Puppeteer to instead of just getting 1 creature, again, with a mana value of 3 or less back, you're getting 2 creatures instead. So even more value. Again, you're basically paying 4 mana for that. Let's say you sacrifice it, get 2 things back, each that cost 3. You were just basically netting mana in a way. You're just going up, essentially, from what you paid for that Gixian Puppeteer to get even more value back out. But now this episode is coming to a close. It's time for me to give you my final thoughts on Gixian Puppeteer. Yeah, I think this card has a lot of potential. I think, again, there are plenty of decks out there that can draw a lot of cards throughout the game, especially on opponents' turns, so this can drain your opponents quite a bit and can give you some life back as well to pad your life total. Of course, you can also just get inherent value out of this. If it gets taken out, you can just get something back. So, kind of replace itself in a way, and of course, in certain ways, can be broken and replace itself, well, an infinite number of times. Or, it can kind of, work with Sophies Daughter or, some clones or however you want to go about it. It can be an infinite combo piece that can be very effective in the right build. But again, you don't have to go infinite for this to provide a lot of value to a lot of decks out there. So yeah, I think a lot of players are going to be pretty excited about this card. And of course, speaking of exciting cards, make sure you're staying tuned to this channel for even more exciting quick takes and spoilers coming up. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.